The instruction in example number 5 is once again to add the fractions to get one big common fraction. You can see that I have quite complicated denominators, and so step by step I'm going to try and simplify them all. The first denominator of x squared plus x plus 1 is in fact fully factorized. You can try, but you will not be able to get two linear factors out of that factor. So as it stands, it is a factorized factor. In the next example, I have a highest common factor of x that I could take out in the numerator to give me x plus 2, and then factorizing the denominator, I have a difference of cubes. Now, if you remember with the difference of cubes, you cube root the first term, you keep your sign, you cube root the second term. Then for your second bracket, you look at the first bracket, the linear bracket. You square the first term, x squared. Change the sign. Find the product of x and 1, which is x. Your last term is always a plus, and square the last term, and 1 times 1 is 1. Going on to my third term, and taking out a common factor of 2 in my numerator, I get 2 into x plus 1. And then, first of all, looking at the denominator, I'm going to do this in 2 steps. The first thing that I notice is that the x squared is in the second term, and I want it to be in the first term. So in my first step, I'm going to take out a minus, and then I'm going to have x squared minus 1. The minus times the minus of the third term is going to give me a plus, so the third term is prefixed by a plus. And then lastly, that denominator of the third term can be factorized by using a difference of 2 squares. Factorizing the difference of 2 squares, then, I can find that I'm now able to find my LCD. Remember that your LCD is the most of each type of factor. The x squared plus x plus 1 factor is repeated both in the first and the second fractions, but only once each. Then I have an x minus 1 factor, and I also have an x plus 1 factor. But before I write down that x plus 1 factor, can you notice that in the third term, where I only have factors in the numerator and the denominator, the x plus 1 factor actually is a common factor both in the numerator and in the denominator. So I'm not going to write it down as a factor for the LCD because I've been able to cancel it out. In other words, I only have 2 factors left as I have written down for my LCD, and these will become the factors of my common denominator for my single fraction. As that first factor is quite a complicated factor, you don't need to try and work out what it would be. You just say that the restrictions are going to be when x squared plus x plus 1 is equal to 0. The second one is a linear factor, so that's easy. So that is going to be when x is equal to 1. And now all that remains is for me to change my numerators. The first numerator was 1, and the new factor in the denominator is going to be x minus 1, so I must say 1 times x minus 1. The old numerator, even though I factorized it, could in fact be written again as x squared plus 2x. And that must be times by any new factor that appeared in its denominator. As I did not need any extra factor, because both of the factors in the LCD were in fact part of the denominator of the second term, I'm going to not times that by anything, and I'm going to indicate that with a 1. In the last term, I had a 2 in my numerator. I only had the x minus 1 factor, so that must be times by x squared plus x plus 1. In my next step, I'm going to simplify the numerator. The first 2 terms remain unchanged of x minus 1. In the next part, I must distribute that minus into its bracket. So I get minus x squared minus 2x. And then lastly, I distribute the 2 into the third bracket, which gives me plus 2x squared plus 2x plus 2. Adding like terms, I find that I'm going to be able to get an answer in my numerator of x squared plus x plus 1. Putting a bracket around that whole numerator, I find that it is repeated once in the numerator and once in the denominator, and now I'm able to cancel that bracket factor. In other words, fully simplified, the fraction that I now have is going to be 1 over x minus 1.